Ally or Steam Deck? Ally or Steam Deck? At $699 for the Asus ROG Ally and $649 for a closely spec'd Steam Deck, what does the extra $50 actually get you? Is Windows on a handheld worth the hassle? Is the battery life really that bad? How do the sticks and buttons feel?
Well, I'm NihongoGamer, and to answer those questions, I ask you this: which would you rather take on holiday? A gaming laptop or something like this? Nintendo Switch.
If you answered gaming laptop, the ROG Ally might be perfect for you. It's a powerful piece of hardware that goes way beyond what a handheld console can do. It's fast, has a better screen, lights up, has a turbo mode that boosts even further when plugged in, and it runs pretty much any game you can throw at it. Heck, if you want to, you can even load up Microsoft Office on it. Don't load Microsoft Office on it. By contrast, the Steam Deck is more like the Switch. Sure, it's technically a PC as well, but instead of Windows, it's running Steam OS, so it gets you closer to that console experience. You can suspend games anytime you want, battery life is reasonable, and more importantly than anything else, it just works. But what does that mean exactly? Am I saying that the Ally doesn't just work?
Not exactly. What Asus has done here is pretty impressive, but compared to a Steam Deck or a console, the experience is more temperamental. For example, this is Armory Crate, the software that Asus gives you to bend Windows so that it acts a little bit more like a Steam Deck. And in theory, this is all you need for a great handheld experience.
Using this dedicated button on the left, you get quick access to power management, mouse emulation, button mapping, screen resolution, refresh rate, an on-screen keyboard, real-time hardware monitoring, FPS limiter, and more. Using a second dedicated button to the right of the screen opens up the main Armory Crate app, where you can browse all your games from multiple launchers, make detailed changes to settings, and content, which is just a bunch of random items that don't really fit into the first two categories. With these two buttons combined, you basically get the full Steam Deck experience with the power and compatibility of Windows. Everything works like magic, and the Ally is a Steam Deck killer.
Is what I want to say, but in everyday use, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. See, when Asus first sent these units out to YouTubers for review, a ton of stuff was broken and it was a bit of a buggy mess. But Asus has constantly been pushing updates to their Armory Crate software and to the firmware, and every single time they do it, it gets a little bit closer to being exactly what we actually want. Will those updates continue into the future? No idea, but when it does work, I seriously love the Ally. I mean, look at this thing. Just holding it makes me feel happy.
By the way, thank you very much to Asus for sending me this unit for the purposes of review. As always, all opinions are my own. Now, there's a ton of reviews out there focused on technical details, but what I want to answer in this review is, what's it really like in daily use? It's all well and good if the benchmarks look impressive, but if you've ever bought a gaming laptop before, you'll know the disappointment of buying something fancy that turns out to be completely useless because it's too big or overheats half the time. So today I'll be covering how it feels to hold, whether the D-pad is good enough for fighting games, battery life, what's it actually like to use daily, and finally, some surprisingly impressive results about display lag.
Actually, you know what? Let's dive into it right now. The Steam Deck has to run games through Proton, which is an extra layer to get your Windows games to run on Linux. The Asus Ally has nothing like that because it just runs Windows by default. And the Proton layer is possibly where some lag can set in because it has to translate from one thing to another, and the screen is just turned off.
Well, it turns out the Ally blows the Steam Deck out of the water when it comes to display lag. Using footage recorded at 240 FPS and a button wired to both handhelds at the same time, you can see here that the Ally is almost twice as fast at displaying the action. Running the Steam Deck at its maximum refresh rate of 60 Hz, it took 103 milliseconds on average, while the Ally destroys it at just 60. For fighting gamers, that's over 6 frames of lag versus 3.6 on the Ally. And while you might not notice the difference in a JRPG, in a fighting game, that's extra time you get for watching your opponent whiff an attack so you can punish with a winning combo. If you're wondering how this compares to PS5, which is most likely going to be the console used for tournaments, I measured an average of 96 milliseconds, which is 5.8 frames of lag, and that's actually quite close to the Steam Deck. The Ally outperforms them both, but keep in mind there are lots of tweaks you can make on all of these systems. PS5 has a variable refresh rate 120 Hz mode, and there's even an input delay reduction option, but to keep all the tests fair, I just had it switched off for this. Now, just to be extra sure, I ran a variety of other tests. The Ally outperformed the Steam Deck in both 60 Hz and 120 Hz modes, with or without VSync on, and even with the PCBs reversed, just in case the lag was coming from the controllers themselves. And on that topic, you might want to choose your controller carefully because, as I described in my video last week, the D-pad on the Ally is not critically flawed. Or is it?
To discuss the D-pad, we have to talk about the ergonomics of this handheld. If you're just going to be using it with a monitor and an arcade stick, you can just buy a gaming laptop. But you don't want a gaming laptop. You want a handheld that you can take on the bus, on the train, and just play anywhere. And for that reason, the Ally is actually brilliant.
With no keyboard to get in the way and built-in controls for most genres, it really does feel very much like a Switch Pro, if such a thing existed. It doesn't have super molded grips like the Steam Deck, but I like that because the more subtle shape of these grips makes it feel more like a handheld. Molded grips have their benefits, but they're also more prescriptive, and so you're forced to hold them in a certain way. Something that actually makes fighting games kind of uncomfortable on the Steam Deck, especially given the position of the D-pad. The Ally does have grips built in, but they're less pronounced, so you can hold it lightly like a Switch, or grasp it more tightly for that Pro controller feel. That being said, this is not a Pro controller. While Asus clearly spent a lot of money cramming a powerful chip in here with a 120Hz full HD 1080p display and an unbelievable cooling system, the controller is definitely where it feels like some compromises had to be made. The face buttons are fine, slightly harder to press than I'd like, but they were okay for rhythm games like Project Diva. The shoulder buttons and triggers feel fine too. Less travel than a DualSense, but plenty for a handheld. The analog sticks feel comparatively loose, but not to the point of being unusable or anything. Then there's the back buttons. On Steam Deck and many Pro controllers coming out, you get as many as 4 of them, but on the Ally we only get 2. Now 2 back buttons may seem like enough, but they may as well not be there at all because you kind of need them to help you deal with Windows. Now the physical buttons themselves I really like. Since they protrude out, unlike the flat paddles on the back of the Steam Deck, I find they're actually useful. But like I say, you probably won't be using them for in-game actions. While Steam Deck handles a lot of things through Steam OS, on the Ally you're kind of running 3 user interfaces at the same time. The face buttons are dedicated to the Asus Armory crate, the back buttons act as Windows 11 shortcuts, and that leaves you with nothing for Steam and your other launchers. They've made updates since which allow you to set secondary features like a home button for quick access to Steam menus, but for the first 3 weeks I had to remap the 2 back buttons to Shift and Tab so I could get to the Steam interface for reordering controllers and other crucial settings. It was frustrating because that left me with no other buttons for the Windows shortcuts like app switching, projection modes, or just the task manager so I could force quit a running game. But like I say, feedback from YouTubers have led to updates to Armory Crate, so if they keep that up, these are not really issues.
Yeah, we know about the buttons, but what about the D-pad? Is it any good? Well, here's what I would say. It's not awful. Is it better than the Steam Deck? Yes. Would I use it to lab some combos in between matches while waiting at a tournament? Yes, absolutely. Would I use it in a match and actually play against people online with this thing? Probably not. And here's why.
What you get on the Ally is a circular D-pad, which is good in theory because you can hit all the diagonals without aiming to hit 2 cardinal directions at the same time. For Street Fighter 6, I was able to hit the basic combos, there's a pivot underneath which prevents it from actuating opposing directions simultaneously, and honestly, I think the position is much better than on the Steam Deck. Originally, I was quite excited about the Steam Deck because the D-pad was higher up, but because of the way you have to grip the Steam Deck, your thumb is forced into this really vertical angle which makes most technical motions harder. The Ally doesn't have this issue, and in Street Fighter, I was having a brilliant time in training mode. But then I went into matches and it became not so awesome.
You see, fighting games are multiple challenges happening at the same time. You have to actually get yourself into an advantageous position. And in order to get yourself into that position, you have to go through something which I like to call the neutral tango.
Okay, I don't actually call it that, but all you need to know is that you have to dance left and right a lot before you get a chance to actually do those combos that you practiced. So imagine my disappointment when I attempted this dance only to accidentally jump towards my opponent frequently and receive a dragon punch to the face. It's difficult to say exactly why this is happening, but it's likely to do with the circular shape. Not all circular D-pads have this issue, but if it's small enough and loose enough, then even pressing left or right can lead to an up or down input if you're not careful to push directly down on it. It's likely made worse by the fact that the pivot is really low down, so pushing down on one direction doesn't reject the other directions, it just sort of actuates the surrounding ones as well. For casual single player modes, as a training mode tool for labbing combos, or for testing specific situations, it's more than adequate.
Actually, I'm running out of time, and that's perfect, because that's exactly how you're going to feel when you play on the Ally, because the battery life on this is not great.
I'm not going to bore you with exhaustive battery tests, but the Ally has 3 power modes and a manual mode for tweaking. In turbo mode, the battery will be dead in less than an hour. In performance mode, you'll probably get 1.5 to 2 hours. And in silent mode, I was using about 40% of the battery in an hour, but I couldn't really finish the test because I put it in standby, and the next time I turned it on, it prompted me to do a Windows update. But upon reboot, I discovered it wasn't just an update, it was a BIOS upgrade, which asked me to answer yes or no to a sentence with no question in it. And anyway, I wasn't able to play for the next 20 minutes, so I just kind of gave up.
And really, that's the gist of it. If you're willing to put the work in, then you can bend this device to your will and make it do pretty much anything you want. But out of the box, it's significantly harder to use than a Switch or a Steam Deck. If you go in thinking it's going to be some kind of Steam Deck killer, then you're going to be a little bit frustrated with the fact that there's just not dedicated buttons for various menus, which are now being set to Windows menus. And then you've got to do the juggling act of running Windows updates on top of Armory Crate updates, on top of all the updates you need to do for all the various game launchers, like the Epic launcher or the Steam launcher or the Xbox Game Pass launcher. Whatever it is you're going to be using, it's all extra stuff that you have to handle instead of being just Steam. And then there's the fact that there's just random glitches, like the buttons don't respond, or the touchscreen will stop responding, or you'll have to like touch the screen or add a shortcut or use the keyboard to bring it back to life, or go to the desktop or bring up the task manager to force quit stuff, and sometimes it just doesn't work. I mean, you had 20 minutes free, but you spent 15 minutes of it trying to fix the problems on your Ally. You've only really got 5 minutes left to play, and by that point, you probably don't have any battery life left anyway. But if you can accept all that, what you've got here is a supremely powerful handheld with a really nice full HD screen which runs at 120 Hz and just destroys the Steam Deck when it comes to display lag. You'll have to commit yourself to that mobile battery life, or buy yourself a couple extra adapters so you can have one at work and one at home so you can charge it while you're at work and make sure there's actually battery power in this thing for your journey home. But at the end of the day, I choose the Ally over the Steam Deck more often than not, and the main reason is that the Steam Deck is just kind of embarrassing. Functionally, it's significantly easier to use than the Ally, but it's big, it's bulky, it looks like a tank. And the ROG Ally, by comparison, well, it's just nicer to look at, the screen is better, it's easier to hold, the D-pad is in a better position, and on top of all that, it's just less laggy. It means I have a competitive advantage when I play on this over the Steam Deck. Will it actually be charged when I pick it up off my desk? No idea, but that's the gamble I'm willing to take. Listen up guys, that's all for the Ally. If you love handhelds like the Ally, make sure you check out this video next. Subscribe if you loved it, hit the like button if you haven't done so already, and comment below. Which would you prefer, an Asus ROG Ally Z1 Extreme or the Steam Deck? That's all for now. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.